Mama. I'm Allison Loftus. I'm a professional counselor here in Rochester, Minnesota, and I own and counsel at Flourish Counseling Center. And first, what I'd like to say is a huge thank you to Rochester Mom for inviting myself and my husband Derrick here to speak on a topic that is very close to both of our hearts and our team at Flourish, and that is maternal mental health. And today what we're going to be focusing on how loneliness, mental health, and motherhood are being affected right now during the pandemic. Super excited to share what we've been learning over the past month about this, and hopefully some of the information that we have to share with you today will be really helpful and valuable as you're starting out your motherhood journey.
I should introduce myself. So I'm Derrick, the professional husband, also part of Flourish, and also chasing around our 3 teenagers. So that's kind of, I forgot about the teenager part. So looking forward to a little discussion on loneliness in the pandemic and motherhood.
Yeah, my brain's been feeling really, really foggy and tired this past year. Yours?
It's been a change for everybody, right?
Yeah, it's been a really, really big change, and just knowing, I think one of the things that we wanted to chat about is just knowing that when we're talking about the pandemic and COVID, our brains are going to feel a little bit more tired because we're getting kind of a fatigue about these terms, and so just knowing that's it's a tiring topic to be listening to right now. But we're hoping to give you a good understanding of how loneliness as an effect has really been impacting us over this past year, and kind of what to normalize what people have been experiencing, so that you can make really great decisions about how to take care of yourself well as we finish out this year of 2021.
Right. And we should probably just throw a little disclaimer in there too, just because, we do come from a clinical background, or Allison does.
I have all the letters.
She's got all the letters. All the support. Just to note that, this is not medical advice. It's just a good informational discussion, and hopefully you guys learn something and maybe get a little bit entertaining out of it too, right?
Yeah. And if you're having any concerns about your health or have further questions after this talk, feel free to reach out to your medical provider, or feel free to even give us a call at Flourish, and we'll be happy to hook you up with any resources and just talk to you a little bit about what's going on and see that we can get you the support that you need. Also, I know that Rochester Mom, they have this really great online. They have a Rochester Mom community on Facebook, and that's a great place where moms can drop questions and get a lot of resourcing and feedbacks from other moms in the Rochester area, and that's also a valuable resource, just a pin away in your back of your head to keep for further down the road.
Yeah. I know you've done a lot of research on this, and it's been coming up in kind of your sessions and stuff. Do you want to talk about kind of some of the changes that the pandemic has how it's impacted general mental health and through this trying time, right?
Right. Well, we know that our mind and body is connected. So not only has the pandemic, in a sense, affected our physical body, it's also an effect, like you're saying, affected our mental health. Mm-hmm. And so with the pandemic there's 2 factors. We've had uncertainty and chronic stress. And what we've seen throughout history is when we have uncertainty and chronic stress, we have an increase in anxiety and depressive symptoms. Okay. That people typically experience more anxiety and more depression with the onset of uncertainty and chronic stress.
Makes sense.
Yeah, and so the general stat out there is that 1 in 5 people will be affected by a mental health illness. Sure. Right? So either someone or you yourself will in effect experience one of the anxiety and depressive disorders, right? And so, and it really touches everyone, because at some point in all of our lives, I think even during this past year, we've all experienced some form of anxiety and depression. Sure. And why is that?
It might not be clinical or something like that, but it's certainly something that we've been impacted by.
Because of loneliness. Right? So when we're in a sense not readily able to access our social connectedness, right? And when loneliness increases it in our brain, we naturally feel more anxious and depressed. And why is that? Well, because with hunger, right, when you feel hungry, right, what do you go do?
You go eat. Right?
You go eat, right. And when you're thirsty, what do you go do?
You go take a drink. Yeah.
Right. And when you're tired, you
sleep, hopefully.
Right. And so when you're feeling lonely, that's your body's signal to go and connect, to say, hey, I want to talk with you, right? I want to share something with you. I want to be with you, right?
Right.
And so like loneliness isn't bad. I think that's one of the things. Loneliness is not bad. If you think of hunger, when you're hungry, it's not necessarily a bad thing. But chronic hunger, malnutrition,
like
right? Not sleeping, right? If you don't sleep, you're going to be more prone to anxiety and depression. You don't eat, you're going to be more prone to anxiety and depression.
Humans, we're geared towards being social, right?
We're geared towards being social. Well, we come out from the moment we come into this world. We're all born, right? And so we're all born into this world, and when we're born, we're already hardwired in a sense between two of our senses, smell and hearing, to socially connect with our mothers. And mom has also gone through significant changes. Her whole sense of smell has in a sense been rewired so that when baby is born, she desires that scent. She just desires it, and the other parts of her brain have changed to a fact that she feels a sense of pain the further away baby is from her.
Yeah, that's interesting because we always focus on like sight and sound, right?
Right.
But sometimes those like smell, stuff like that isn't. That's interesting. That I think that's something that we'll talk a little bit about with isolation too, right?
Right.
And how that's one of the senses that has been taken away from us. So that's kind of.
Right.
Made our brain go a little bit, kind of what's going on here.
Right. And also like mental health is also significantly increased for women during periods of developmental changes. So like in adolescence, right? We all go through that. That's the first time we see like anxiety and depression popping up. And for women, another point where it really pops up is in pregnancy and the postpartum period. And our body's going through a lot of changes. We're also going through a lot of societal changes. And so we're more prone, we're more at risk to...
Like what kind of societal changes are you talking about?
Well, societal changes is you go in a sense from being just you, right? To maybe you and a partner, because every relationship looks a little different, right?
Sure.
So you go from just you to you and having to care for an entire human being, and not only that, for like the first 3 months, for most of us, we are entirely just caring for that human being on our own, right? And so we've gone from a working human being where most of our social connections are at work or out in the world, where we're in a sense being able to do what we want to do in our time. We know how to take care of this body. We know how to feed it. We know how to sleep. That all of a sudden our whole system, our whole social construct, our way of functioning, not only out in the world, but as an individual, completely changes and is now ruled, in a sense, by the needs of this tiny human being who can't take care of themselves. And then you as a mom are like, the further this baby is away from me, the more I feel a sense of like dread and panic, and I want to keep baby close. Right? And so then it's hard to be like, but then there's also like this deep, deep longing to reconnect to that woman, over, that pull back to that, that woman. But then there's this drive, there's just this push towards baby, but then you also feel pulled in these other directions. And it's really, that ambivalence is postpartum period is nothing but ambivalent.
Interesting. So back to like loneliness, we talked a little bit about like the difference between loneliness and social isolation. I think that's kind of important to touch on too, because they're not the same thing, right?
Right. So loneliness it's perceived, it's internal. Okay, and social isolation is, in a sense, you can externally see it, right?
Something you can measure, like,
right.
You're physically not coming into contact.
You're physically not coming into contact. And social isolation is also a normal part of emotional processing. If you think about like after someone dies, there's a period of time where you really need that solace. You need that solitude. You need that time to just be with you and grieve that, and then loneliness kicks in and you go back out and you reconnect as this new person without that person.
Okay.
Right? And so social isolation isn't bad. It does serve a purpose, just like loneliness serves a purpose.
So if you're socially isolated, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're lonely. Is that kind of
right?
What you're saying?
So like you can have like, so introverts, right? Let's look at the introvert versus extrovert, right? An introvert can, I'm like an ambivert. I can go both ways. So an introvert will maybe, just have one or two really good friends, right?
Sure.
And just being out in the world and generally around people kind of fills, like, if you think of like people having like a social need barometer, right? And everyone's a little different just based on their genetics and way they're put together. And introversion and extroversion is very genetic, right? So we all have like these different meters. So like but an extroverted person may in a sense need more friendships in order to get that social need met, right? However, you can have lots of friendships and still feel lonely.
Sure.
And you can have just a few friendships and feel very connected and fulfilled socially. So they don't necessarily, loneliness is very an internal thing. It's a perceived thing.
Yeah, and I think that's interesting because I know it's been talked about like introverts and like this pandemic is no big thing for them. And speaking from being very much an introvert, right? There is some truth to that. At first, I didn't really. I noticed a change in general life flow, but the one thing I think that gets lost in all that is that introverts, while they don't need the vast array of people, sometimes just one or two good friends, this pandemic has really dampened that connection with that one or two good friends too. So at the end of the day, we're kind of in the same boat as the boisterous extroverts too. We're all a little bit starved for human contact.
Yeah, and that's why there's this feeling of tiredness, this feeling like we all are experiencing on some level a feeling of loneliness.
Sure. And why is that tiring though for being lonely? You're not having that social contact. What is that mechanism?
One of the things I love to tell my clients, especially because we're all guilty of this, right? We don't like asking for help. And I think it's so funny because we're wired completely to need help our whole entire lifespan. So not only do we need people to bring us into this world, right, to deliver us, we need people to bury us and throw the party. Right?
Yeah, sure.
Right? So and there isn't like a moment in our life where we don't need other people. We don't need other people's brains, right? Now, I think in our culture, especially for us as if you've been in the American culture, right? There's this drive towards capitalism, independence, like do it on your own. Doing your own is better. If I just work hard enough and try hard enough, I can accomplish all the things, right? And I think a lot of moms go into that with postpartum, where they're like, there's this sense of like, why can't I do all these things, right? Why can't I meet all the needs of this newborn, right? It's because whether we are aware of it or not, we always need people. For me to live in a house, right? For me to have shelter, one of the basic needs that every human being has to have, physical needs, a house. I could not have a house without other people.
Right.
Even
Somebody
to turn on my
build
lights, someone has to build it,
all
someone
that
has
stuff.
to be working on providing the electricity, someone has to, in a sense, all those little things. But I'm not thinking about that, right? So therefore, I can do the things I like to do, like counsel. Right? So I can counsel and help the electrician, right? So that they're able to function, so that you know what I mean? Like it's so I use.
Well, I think because a lot of people think about that in that physical sense, right? Like I need to move a house, or I'm moving, right?
Right.
So you reach out to family and friends, and they provide physical labor to move. But there's a intellectual and emotional component to that too, like going to school. You're relying on the mental energy of your teacher to learn something, right? So it's kind of that same concept. It's not lifting a heavy object, but you're still lifting a heavy mental object. Just discussing with your partner your day. Some of the struggles that you've had or successes, and that shared. So it's just a different type of energy share. Does that?
I think what you're talking about is the body budget.
Yeah.
And you've done a lot of reading on this. And what have you learned about the body budget?
Yeah, I think kind of basically what we just said. just like relying on the people around you physically, you
Right.
rely on them mentally. And,
Yeah.
you know, what happens and what is happening is, you know, with this pandemic, not only is their physical presence been kind of
Right.
removed or diminished, but their emotional and mental presence has been as well. And in a way, it's almost like a death, right? When
Yes.
somebody dies, the reason why we grieve is because that's that's more effort that our brain has to put into things now to just get by on a daily life. You know, you don't have that resource available to you to kind of carry that load with you in
Right.
you know, in your journey in life. And same thing with the pandemic, it's a little bit of a grief process too, because
Right.
we can't share with people
Right.
as openly and as readily as we used to, even though we're more connected than ever
On the screens.
on the screens.
Yeah, which just to take a moment, just to give everyone just a moment of what this feels like. Sometimes experiential things are helpful in understanding what we're talking about. And so we feel people from head to toe. And so if you just take a moment and think about someone that you really feel connected to and cared about, and you just take a moment and imagine them, you can kind of just feel where they show up in your body. And it's just an interesting thing to do, to realize that you probably, even if you think of a scent, you can feel a scent. If you think of a noise, you can feel a noise. You know, there's a feeling that's embodied in all the senses.
Memory is
Right.
often triggered by smell, like over the
Smell,
holidays.
yes.
And
Yeah.
that's why that's such a big memory maker, is because there's sights and sounds and smells and
Right.
all that stuff, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so when the pandemic first happened, I got on screen and told everyone that I think the world was experiencing the world's biggest postpartum period. Because our lives went from looking this way and then overnight looking a completely different way.
Everybody kind of became postpartum.
Right, they all
overnight.
became postpartum
Yeah, sure.
overnight, right?
Sure.
And so like this, it's almost like this big wall came up, and I call that wall the screen, right? The screen came off, and it, in a sense, cut us off from the things that build empathy, that in a sense release those endorphins, that, what's that hormone called? The cuddle hormone.
The
I always say it
oxytocin.
incorrectly. It sounds like a...
Yeah. Sounds like you're saying Oxycontin.
Yeah, Oxycontin, yeah.
It's
No,
oxytocin.
Oxytocin, right? And so those are very much released with this,
Right.
with touch, with scent, with hearing,
Right.
and with like seeing. I learned to trust you by looking at your whole entire body. And so when we moved
It's
to...
hard to do that with
Yeah,
this stuff.
when you move from screen, when you move to the screen, we are in a sense cut off from that. Is it better than nothing? Absolutely.
Yeah, so
absolutely.
It's not bad,
right. Right.
It's there's good with like
Right.
that connection, the
Right.
social media, you know, working from home.
Yes.
There's good and bad. Right?
There's good and good.
And
well, helpful and unhelpful. I like to
Helpful
say
and
that.
helpful. Yeah,
Helpful, not as helpful as it could be. Like if you're like gold standard, it's kind of like it's going to be a little. So like
There's good.
so instead of relying on 5 senses, we're relying on 2.
Sure.
Right. So and the second one, which is sound, we're still not feeling it in our whole bodies. We feel sound in our whole entire body, right? And so you sound different and feel different in my body here. I don't trust you as well as I trust you over a screen, and studies have shown this.
The other way around. Right.
Right. Yeah. Well, I trust you now. I trust you now. So you're not as trustworthy over the screen to me,
'Cause
even
you
though I
can't-
love you and I know you.
You can't see all of
Yes.
that. You can't smell the
Right.
little mannerisms that,
Yes.
that you just, no matter how good the camera, no matter how
Right.
good the microphone is, it just won't ever be transmitted, right?
Right. So I feel a little more like disconnected from you, and I start to get a little scared of you.
Sure.
And that's natural. That's loneliness, right? And I'm also having to work twice as hard to get the information to learn if I can trust you. That's why we're all so tired from
so
being on
yeah.
screens, because I'm having to work twice
After
as
a
hard.
day of Zoom calls, you haven't done anything, right? But yet,
Right.
the brain consumes, 20% of all of the energy that you intake.
Right.
So if that's working really hard, it's kind of like going to the gym, right?
Right. So you're exhausted.
Right.
You're exhausted, and and you've only used 2 instead of 5. So that body budget, right? So we have all those 5 senses. They help us so much, and we're down to 2.5 because I don't think the sound one's quite as good.
How do we go about differently about taking care of our mental health needs during the pandemic? I mean, because hopefully, we all do kind of take care of that one way or another, but now we're still in that kind of unknown realm. It's a year into it, but we're still kind of figuring out and navigating, right? So what are some of the things that we can look at differently or maybe change how we go about, taking care of ourselves?
Yeah. Do you remember how it was after when we first had kids?
Try not to.
Can you remember it?
Yeah, I mean.
Do you remember how it felt?
Yeah, it's a complete change. I mean, even for the dad part of it, I don't think it's just the mom part of it. It's the partner's end too, right? Where, some things are the same, but a lot of the things are different. Your relationship with your partner's different. Right. Friends are different. Yeah, it's a huge adjustment, and I think the big thing with like that is, I think the corollary is most people when they go through that, there is a social adjustment where they are kind of cut off from that social circle that they had before, right? So. Yeah, I mean, it does kind of feel similar in that way, only this might have been dragging out a little bit longer.
A little bit longer than the world's longest.
Right.
But, that tiredness, that, blur,
Yeah, it wasn't even, not even just the sleep deprivation, it's just the tiredness, because luckily we had a colicky kid, but he slept.
Slept at night.
So we were able to sleep, but we were still exhausted, even though we slept, right? Because it was so much mental energy to do it. It wasn't sleep deprivation.
Right. And we were fortunate in the fact that we had both sets of family in town, and I had younger teenage sisters, and we had a ton of help. And still, for us, we were exhausted. And even with all that social support, I still went through depression with all the kiddos. Even if you have all the things, it doesn't mean that you won't feel depressed. That doesn't mean that sometimes that depression and anxiety, just sometimes they show up. We can be doing all the things, and sometimes they just show up. That this isn't getting back to that idea that I can just muscle my way through something, or if I can do all these steps, that it's in a sense going to lead to me. You may not dig as deep a hole, but the hole may still be there.
Sure.
Right? So when talking about practical things, I always like to reassure, especially new moms or moms, coming into motherhood, that this isn't a matter of you're not trying hard enough. This isn't a character thing. This is a whole new developmental stage for you. And so kind of the best indicator if a kid's going to be successful at college is their ability to make friends. And so it's because they're going through a major developmental change from teenagehood to adulthood.
Sure.
And their ability to make that transition is their ability to make friends. And for moms, I think what we don't recognize, and dads and partners too, there is a change, but their change is kind of after baby's born over that first year.
Sure.
So their brains do change, but
we're just slower, is what you're saying.
You're just slower. Okay. You're just so slow. Just get done faster. No.
Makes sense.
But in a sense, for moms, speaking from the mom's perspective, is the sense that you're so just immediately cut off from your social ties that you had before, and they may need to look different in the postpartum period, because what you're looking for is someone who looks like you. We're all looking for someone. Can you mirror back to me?
Sure.
That's soothing.
Sense. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Can you mirror your experience, my experience back to me in some way? I know it doesn't have to match up, but that's soothing.
So now you're kind of calming. Seeking that mom that's going through that similar experience.
You're seeking that. You're seeking that similar experience. You're seeking that, and so just knowing that's important. Those social ties are super important, and the more you have, in a sense, the better it is for your brain.
Okay. So I know you hit on some resources and whatnot at the beginning of the talk. Is there anything else you want to recap some of those where if people are okay, that makes sense, that I'm hearing that fits in with where I'm at right now. Where can they go to kind of dig in a little bit deeper?
I think I skipped your first question about the practical things people can do because I went off about
Actually, yeah, it didn't become practical, right?
It didn't become practical because I just wanted to preface with you can do all these
you
things.
You were laying the foundation.
You just drove over my foundation. Yeah. I laid the foundation and then.
Moving on to the next thing.
Just back up the truck.
Okay.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So. Practical things you can do.
I'm paying attention.
Practical things, in addition to maintaining routines, recognizing that, I think all of us have kind of struggled this in a way when our work life went from commutes and meeting other people. We had margins to kind of decompress. And all of a sudden we've had Zoom, 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 or online, and we haven't had those margins to decompress. Recognizing that having that awareness is really helpful, that we need to pause. All human brains need to pause. And I would even say, for just 5 minutes every hour, we all need to pause. To have that space and that margin to reflect, to breathe, to notice what we're feeling, to process. And I know that's so hard when a new baby comes into your world, because you have that I can't be separate from them. I can't take that pause because their needs feel so immediate. But just taking that pause, setting baby down in the arms of someone next to you, even if they're crying, put on headphones. We had a baby that didn't stop crying, so believe me, put on headphones, take 5 minutes and pause. Just walk. Music is a beautiful way. Play a song that just you need to hear in that moment, having foods available that you love, but to get to the practical thing, that's the main thing. Pause. Okay. Assess what your need is.
Pausing. So what I was doing is I was demonstrating not pausing. Yes, so that was just a demonstration.
Thank you.
We've got that.
I'm so glad you demonstrated. Thank you for demonstrating that for us.
I'm good at that.
You're so amazing. I'm so glad I married you.
Did you want to talk about resources?
Well, we didn't get to the 5 things, right? We have to rest. We have to rest. You have to have every human being's basic needs, right? This is what we go through. Rest at regular times. So going to bed at night around the same time and getting up at the same time. Your body loves routine. It's its favorite thing to do, right? Eating at regular times and watering yourself at regular times. Connecting to something that brings you, joy is probably a good way to say it, but it's that creative, that spiritual, that kind of soul side to us.
Sure.
If you watch the movie Soul, it's kind of when you get into that flow, just kind of that you're connecting with that every day. And then that you're moving your body. So the word that people use out there is exercise, and sometimes that can come with a lot of pressure. So in the postpartum, just that you're moving your body, and you probably already are with rocking baby and walking baby around, and recognize that's movement. That's movement. I'm moving my body, right? And then there's one more, but I forgot what it is.
You went through.
Connection. It's the social connection. Yes. It's the social connection.
Again, just demonstrating. So, yeah.
Social connection.
Get the oxytocin going.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. Just have a moment of oxy. Oxy, give me my oxy. Give it to me now. But just that social connection. And right now, what that looks like is reaching out to having those people, those core people that you can reach out to any time of day. When that lonely, just to say, hey, I'm just feeling this, and I don't need you to make the loneliness go away. I recognize that this is probably just a part of life because we're in a pandemic, but I just need to be reminded that I'm loved.
Just need to be heard, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, makes sense.
Sorry, I'm always gonna cry because I think that's so important for people to know. Because that's what's at the heart of what everything I do, is that the total idea that you are not alone. That you are so loved. what social belonging does for us is it improves our decision making. It actually prolongs our life and gives us a better quality of life. Mm-hmm. And from social belonging, from social connectedness, I get these resources for my sense of self. I get the idea that I'm loved, mm-hmm. that I'm worthy. Bring me to the potluck so I can get out of this. Significant, that I'm significant, that I get, like, in social connectedness, what it is that I feel esteemed, I feel loved, and I feel like I'm contributing something of significance to the group, and I'm also receiving something of significance from the group.
You had the illustration of a potluck.
That doesn't have to be something big. Sometimes in our celebrity, like, culture that we live in a little bit, we have a little bit of celebrityness. We got those celebrity crushes, right? It's fun. It's all good fun. But at the same time, we think we have to do these really big things, right? That the bigger the thing, the more significant it is. And I think the example we came up with was the potluck, right? Like, you remember that one person's dish, right? And you look forward to it every potluck, right?
It's not a big thing. It's
not a big thing. It's just, right.
Or even if it's not a good dish, right? Even if it's...
Right. You know that they're...
right. Yeah.
Or so-and-so is going to bring the bucket of Kentucky Fried Chicken, exactly. Right? Yeah. And the pizza box.
But that's significant.
Right. That's significant.
That's a memory to somebody.
Right, and you feel loved and catered for, and you feel like you belong, and it activates that feeling of social connectedness. I forgot this fact, and I'm going to throw it in, total an ADHD moment, in case you guys, no one already knows, I have ADHD, and that's why Derrick's always with me, because he scaffolds my brain, because it's wonderful and creative, but so tangential. And the fact that popped into my brain is every mother, doesn't matter, like I was saying, how resourced, whatever it is, the first 2 weeks of the postpartum period experience a significant increase in loneliness, just for, like, the way postpartum is. So there's not a mom that's untouched. It's inevitable. You are going to experience. So just know that you're not doing anything wrongish. You can't do it wrongish or righter-ish.
All right.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Anything else we need to? Do you think we hit it all? Think we covered it all?
I mean, it's hard to cover it all, right? I mean, it's such a big topic.
Yeah.
And we could go on and on and on and on all day long. But I think the important thing is just to, even though this is kind of a one-sided thing, that hopefully people are heard even through this conversation, that they kind of see themselves a little bit. Right,
that we're just trying to validate that it's okay to feel lonely right now.
Right.
And that there are little things you can do to kind of help the loneliness not take as much space. But the loneliness is going to be there right now. And it's going to be here for a bit. And it will also take us, we're all going to feel a little socially awkward when we go out there, because loneliness kind of makes
Not wearing a mask.
Not wearing a mask, yeah. But, like, when we go back out, loneliness, when we feel lonely, we also get a little more scared of the outside world. Mm-hmm. That's just the way the brain works. And so we just start negatively interpreting the world and how other people will perceive us. And sometimes just knowing that you might, when you first go out, feel a little bit more like, can I trust you?
Yeah, right.
Are you not going to like me? Am I still likable? We're going to be like, still likable? Okay, cool. Just know that's normal. And when you feel that loneliness, kind of bubble on up. There's one thing that I really like to do, and I just put my hand right here in my heart, and I just close my eyes and I rock a little bit, and I just take a deep breath, going back to that pause. And I just imagine people who really love me and care about me. And like we said before, it's not the number of people. It can be one. One is enough. So in those moments, when you're feeling really frazzled and overwhelmed, and the uncertainty seems too big, and the scary things in the world, we don't have all the answers for what's happening right now. We just put our hands right here in our hearts and remind ourselves of the people who love us and care about us, and remind us of our lovability, our worthiness, and our significance.